Welcome to the Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery, where every death had a life and every life had a story. My name is Jennie Johnson.
Hello, and I'm Diane Hartshorn.
And
My
thank you very much to our listeners who were willing to go a week without an episode. We actually had our episode recorded, but because I was so out of it and drugged up on meds with being sick and everything, I just didn't have the energy to put together the promo part of it and get, our guest Jeffrey had sent us all those lovely photos
Mm.
to share, and I didn't have the energy to go back through them and make sure that everything was put together. So I appreciate our listeners waiting an extra week for that episode, but it was fabulous. It came out, well, as of this recording, as we're recording now, it would have come out yesterday. And we talked about Shaker Hill Cemetery.
And for Jennie not to do that, she was really, really sick.
Yeah, I spent 4 solid days in bed, and a couple more just trying to recuperate. And even now, I don't know if it sounds rough to you guys. It sounds rough to me. My voice still is not quite, but I'm drinking my throat coat and all of that fun stuff. So today, though, we are excited to welcome back a returning guest who the last time we had her on, actually, we've had her on a couple times now, but I fangirled super hard the first time we had her on because we had been following each other on Twitter, and she had put out some of my favorite cemetery books. This was the first one that I got, 199 Cemeteries to See Before You Die. And then last year she came out with 222 Cemeteries to See Before You Die. Yes, I have all of them. So we would like to welcome back to the show, Loren Rhodes.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me back.
Yes, and Loren is coming back partially to talk about another new book that she has coming out very soon. So she's going to tell us about that. And you've been you did some other cemetery business. You met up with Tui Snyder recently, in person for the first time, which is always exciting.
Great. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about maybe that meetup with Tui before we get into your book.
Well, she's been on this, I don't know how many times she's been around the world.
I know.
She's just
so many times.
Amazing. She let me know she was going to be in San Francisco. Could we meet up and go down to Colma? And for people who don't know, Colma is where all the cemeteries in San Francisco were uprooted and moved to in the 1940s. And so it's a little town. It's got, I think, 1 million dead people and about 1,000 live people.
I love that.
17 cemeteries. So it's amazing. And I was super excited to take her, but we only had an afternoon. And so how do you do this whole thing? So I picked them up at the train station and I said, on your left, here's the Italian cemetery. And this is the Oddfellows, look at them as we drive by, because the Cypress Lawn is, it's the Garden Cemetery of Colma. So it's landscaped and beautiful. And they have an arboretum that's really spectacular. But mostly Tui and I ran around and looked at angels because that's my favorite. Like, here's an angel I like, and here's another one I like.
That must have been so much fun.
It was great. It was a shame. It was just a couple of hours because I had to get them back into town. But I was so excited to get to meet her in person.
I think she would be so much fun.
It really,
it
was just, we were just the whole afternoon.
I love it.
Great.
No, it's always fun to meet up, with those fellow cemetery people, especially when we've been in contact with them, either online or email or, however we do it. But to meet you guys in person and then spend the time in the cemeteries is always
so fun. I should follow that up and say, if you guys are ever out my way, come out. I'll show you some cemeteries.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, definitely.
We're going to have to start. We really do have to start planning our trips now. We've been saying this for almost 5 years now. It's time to start making those plans. And I may have to scale back on some theater, but that would be okay.
Or just, in your down season.
Exactly.
Spot and
just go. So you have a new book. So one of the reasons we asked you back is because you have a new book coming out. And I'm super excited about it. And so tell us a little bit about this new book. What it's called? What went into this one? Okay. The last book we discussed with you was your book that you had put together, which was a compilation of stories from others,
right?
There's so many good stories in that book. Like I said, I wanted to show it off today, and I don't know where my copy of it is, meaning it's somewhere around the house.
That one.
Yes. The angel on the cover. And it's so good. The stories in it, I still don't, we talked about last time how you had to pick through the stories that people submitted, and I still don't know how you were able to turn any story away. But yes.
It's because there's always the hope of, well, next time I do a book like this.
So yeah, tell us a little bit. Your new book is about cemeteries, obviously.
Yeah. It's the second in a series. This is the first one.
Wish You Were Here.
Wish You Were Here, which is it's a bunch of cemetery essays that I wrote over the years, mostly about cemeteries as tourist destinations. So going to Père Lachaise and Mount Auburn and the Hiroshima Peace Park and St. Louis, St. Louis #1 in New Orleans, and just trying to get an overview, I guess, of why cemeteries are important and why people would visit them and what all you can learn from them and everything. So it's, I think 45 cemeteries and 30 essays, something like that. Anyway, I've always wanted to do a second book. So the new one is going to be called Still Wish You Were Here, because I'm clever like that. And it's the same sort of deal, a bunch of cemeteries and a bunch of essays, but I'm thinking of it more as like a cemetery memoir, because this second book, Still Wish You Were Here, is going to be a lot more personal. The little cemetery I grew up in, and places where my family is buried, and dragging my kid to Singapore and Barcelona and all kinds of other exotic places, because if you grow up with me, you have to go visit cemeteries. So
I think both of our kids got to experience that as well.
Yeah.
There's worse experiences kids could have. So
I was working this afternoon on an essay about, we have a Spanish mission in San Francisco. San Francisco's name for the mission that founded the city. And one of the school trips that I was super excited about was taking the kids to the mission. Yay, we can all go and enjoy the cemetery at the mission. And their school was really good about teaching them Ohlone history, the native history here, and putting the Spanish into some kind of context and all of that. But
which is great.
Didn't talk to them at all about the cemetery. And I assumed, since we were going and there was going to be a docent, that there would be a docent that could, walk us around, because our cemetery is, it was much, much bigger. And it's basically now the greatest hits of people buried in the Mission Cemetery. They've put them all into this tiny little patch of ground. But they're people who were killed by the Vigilance Committee, and some of the Spanish and Mexican settlers that the streets and the neighborhoods are named after are buried in the Mission. I mean, for me, it's really exciting.
Yeah.
But none of that was brought up to the kids. And I didn't know in advance that I should prepare a cemetery tour, but I would have, if I'd known that's what they needed. So we got to the cemetery, and they pretty much just turned the kids loose to look around. And so I got my little group of kids, and I said, okay, can you find a lamb? Can you find an angel? Let's go look for cemeteries and cemetery gravestones. And so the essay is about, my expectations and what third graders are actually capable of understanding about cemeteries, and hopefully expressing how beautiful the place is, so people want to go and visit for themselves.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of a bummer that they didn't think to have a docent give more information about who's there and why they're there. I mean, I guess it's great. I'm glad that they got the local history as, part of their history lesson, because that's important. And we've said it, I don't know how many times on this podcast, when you're standing at the gravesite of some of these people, it really kind of makes the history real in a way that nothing else does.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a bummer that the kids didn't get to have that experience. Although your group was lucky to have you just because you were cemeteries. So those kids still got an education in your
Yeah.
group.
But for the kids that live in Bernal Heights, to stand at the grave of Jose Bernal and
Mhm.
this is the guy that your neighborhood is named for. I think that's cool. There's
Yeah.
just
Because
some.
it makes it real. And even, some people look at a cemetery being the end of
Mhm,
everything.
mhm.
And I remember somebody had quoted something it's like a cemetery is more where history begins than where it ends.
Yeah.
Because when you see that person's name, if it was somebody that didn't know, then maybe they would it would spark a question as like, well, who is this person? What do
Mhm.
they do? And hopefully they would take the time to research. So yeah, that was sort of sad that they didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah. Well, and you see street names and
Mhm.
they're just names. It could be somebody local, it could be somebody national, you don't
Yeah.
know. But if you see the name Argeo and then you stand at Argeo's grave, that's a connection that you weren't making before.
Right.
And it's not just history in the cemetery with the dead people. It's
Right.
history is all throughout the city, but the dead people can kind of bring it back to life.
Yeah. And you're right. I think a lot of people, when they see the street names or the name of a park or,
Mhm.
community center, whatever it is, because so often we name them after
Or
people
the
in our
schools.
communities. Yeah.
Yeah.
Schools, especially, you're usually named after them. It's nice to be able to give the people that connection
Mhm.
so that it becomes more than just a name or a word or, a phrase. It's something that actually means something
Mhm.
where it didn't before. So I am glad that you were on the tour and at least some of the kids in that group got to learn probably a little extra than
Yeah,
they had
more than they
planned,
were
but
expecting. Yeah.
it is something that I wish when we do historical tour, and I've taken, in my travels, I've gone on plenty of tours, historical tours, and sometimes the cemeteries are like, if you're doing an outdoor tour, they're like on the way to
Mhm.
whatever it is, or they're part of the town, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, this is such and such cemetery," and somebody, this family might be buried here or whatever, and then they kind of just, it gets skipped over as the rest of the tour rather than the starting point of, by
Hmm.
the way, if you take the time to walk through the cemetery, you're going to come across this person, this person, this
Mhm.
person, this person, and you've seen their name all over the town, and this is where they ended up and after all was said and done. So I wish more tour guides would do that with the cemeteries in the area, wherever they're at, not just there, but also, wherever you're taking tours historical wise,
Yeah, instead of the cemetery being the footnote, have it
which
Well,
be.
it feels like so often.
Yeah,
or this is a separate tour, but it's only going to appeal to certain people, and
right.
so not everybody's encouraged to go.
Right. And I think there's a lot more people that would visit cemeteries that don't if they had that sense of the history of
Mhm.
things.
Mhm.
I think so often, and part of it's our own culture and the way we think about death and cemeteries. People are like, oh, it's a sad place to go. It's just dead people. And they don't go looking for the artwork that you're going to find in the
Mhm.
cemetery and the interesting names. I know last year, I don't remember, I saw it somewhere online, maybe it was an article or something. There was a couple that had gone through a cemetery. They were walking it on purpose because they were looking for a name for their new baby. And so they
Ah,
were trying to select names from a cemetery. And it raised a lot of interesting, it must have been somewhere on social media because I think it was the comment section that drew people's attention. A lot of people were shocked, like, why would you go to a cemetery to pick out a name for your baby? But I was like, I've seen some really cool names on
Mhm.
headstones, even older headstones, with some really interesting names that you wouldn't think about maybe otherwise. I thought it was a great way to come up with baby names.
I
Well, you
think
can't go through the
it's
phone book anymore, so
great.
True. Yeah, that doesn't really exist anymore.
yeah.
But yeah, I think being able to have your essays for people to read the first one and then your second book to go through and read those connections the way you've made them, hopefully will open up people's eyes to the
I
fact
hope
that a
so.
cemetery is a great place to make those kinds of connections.
A
Well,
lot of
one of
people,
the
yeah,
sorry,
don't.
sorry,
Like I
go
say, a lot
ahead.
of people don't because when my girlfriends and I go on our yearly trip, I'm always dragging them to a cemetery, and they're not cemetery people at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's been times I almost had to run through the cemetery in Trinidad because they don't listen to the podcast. They just sat in the car, and I was like, pew, 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 all over the place, instead of taking time to do this. Where when we did go up to Leadville, they actually did get out and walked around, and they fell in love with it. So it's that slowly,
Mm-hmm.
they humor me, but they're seeing things differently now. So that's pretty cool.
My best friend from high school found out that I was going down to Detroit to look at cemeteries by myself. And, I live in a big city. Detroit is a big city. I wasn't concerned about it. I had a Garmin to give me direction, so I wasn't going to get lost. But she said, don't go by yourself. I should go with you. So we went down to, oh, I can't remember. There are several that have wood in their names. And I can't remember which one this one is. But anyway, we went to the cemetery that's by one of the big auto plants. And it was the auto plant that had contaminated the river to the extent that the river caught on fire at one point when I was a kid.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, we found the cemetery and the stones were all black from the soot from the cemetery. And that was really interesting, and as we're poking around in the cemetery, the ice cream truck was going by outside the gate. And they were playing the Look for the Union Label song, which, next to this plant and, the history of Michigan is all this history of unions and labor organizing. And, it was such a perfect moment. I'm so glad she was there with me. Like no one would ever believe this story.
Right. And I'm sure a lot of the folks buried there worked in those auto plants and other places, because that's what even now, but still for a long time, that's what employed a huge chunk of Michigan's population.
Yeah.
So that and the copper mines that were out that way, all of that stuff. I think that's awesome that you had that moment with the ice cream truck. I love that.
Well, and I dragged her to this cemetery. We went on retreat one year because she and I are both writers. And I'm like, well, we're going to be in this part of Michigan that I'm not familiar with. So what is there? And I got on Atlas Obscura and they said, oh, there's the Magician's Cemetery.
Ooh.
Well, we got to go see the Magician's Cemetery.
That sounds awesome.
It was really cool. Harry Blackstone he had bought property there. And so there's a little tiny town called Cologne, Michigan, that's the biggest maker of tricks, magic tricks, because their store there and their factory, if it's a factory, anyway, where they make their their tricks. And so, if you need like the rings that come apart or scarves or whatever, they've got it there. And so because Blackstone lived there, his troupe did a show every year before they went on the road. And so, there's theaters and all this stuff. And more people started to come who did magic. And so this little country graveyard is just full of people that, the headstones have like, one of the guys was the Magnificent Fraud. And one of the other guys, juggled billiard balls. And, just their headstones were really interesting. And, all these claims about, this is the greatest prestidigitation ever, or stuff like that. And we had the best afternoon just poking around in this little cemetery.
Fun.
So yeah, it was pretty much interesting stuff everywhere you go.
Yeah. Oh, that would be so much fun to read those headstones and see the different names that magicians chose for themselves and what their big talent was. Yeah, that would be.
We might have to do an episode on that one.
I know
you got to check it out.
I was going to say that might have to be a whole episode. Because that would be a lot of fun to learn more about. I never even thought about. I mean, yes, there's lots of magicians all over, and I'm sure they're buried all over the place, but a whole cemetery with a bunch of them.
Well, you've seen like the show folks graves, right? Where there's like show folks rest or something like that. It never occurred to me that there'd be like all these magicians in one place, but there are more people buried. It's another place where there are more people buried in the cemetery than are living in the town. But
I love coming across cemeteries like that.
Yeah.
It's like the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in Concord,
Mhm.
Massachusetts. There's way more dead people there than live in the whole town of Concord, but
Oh, that would be nice though.
I'd like to
it,
see that one someday.
oh, it's such a, I mean, I went because I wanted to go to Author's Ridge, which is in
Yeah.
that cemetery, but also there's thousands and thousands of really cool graves there. And actually there's some architects buried there and stuff. There again, history comes to life there in a way that you
Yeah.
just don't think about it any other
Well,
place.
seeing this magician cemetery at first, I was kind of disappointed that, I know Houdini's buried in New York and
Right.
the big names aren't buried there. But then after a while, I thought this is really charming because these are people who this is what they loved. This is, they did what they loved. They took it on the road. It must have been a really hard life, but they're so proud of it. You see it on their stones. They're just thrilled to have done the amazing things that they did.
And in their
That's
time,
really
they
cool.
probably were big, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I grew up, I don't know if you remember Blackstone on TV.
I know who he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was on all the talk shows and
Hmm.
there were commercials for him and back when they did magic on TV. I guess nobody believes in magic anymore, but
I was gonna say every now and then you might catch. There's a few of them still, but not
yeah.
often. It's kind of
Yeah.
lost its
Well, it seems like it's a thing you do. You go to the theater, right, to
right.
see magic. You don't see it on TV.
Well, and
Yeah.
I think for some of it, I think it's more fun to see it live too,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of depending on the types of tricks and magic that they're doing.
Hmm.
And the fact that the magicians themselves often involve their audience so that they can make it even more appealing to everybody.
Right. Because you have everybody else's reactions and
Right. And
anticipation.
you're hoping that the person they've chosen doesn't actually know how the trick works.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And they pull it off. Yes, that's always fun.
I
So
went on a ghost tour in San Francisco, and it was really fascinating. But the guy was a close-up magician, and so a couple of places through the tour, he'd like stop and do a trick. And
oh, I love
I
that.
never did figure out how. I mean, we were all standing in a clot around him, right?
Uh-huh.
He couldn't have. He couldn't have done thing, pulled something out of his sleeve or whatever, because we were all standing right there. So that was really fun.
He had his ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, must have
I
been
love that.
magic.
Oh, I can't. This book is, I mean, I knew I was going to like it anyway, but as you're telling these stories about some of the places you wrote about, it's just, oh, so exciting. And also, yes, episode ideas coming out,
Mm-hmm.
going farther. I know we've had a listener request to do Johnson's Island in, where did we say this one was?
Um,
I can't remember off the top of my head. I've been trying to contact somebody there to actually be a guest on the show because it's a Civil War cemetery and all of that.
oh, it was off of from a oh, bless it, a prison.
Yes, it was a Civil War prison camp and cemetery and everything. And it's really cool. I'm trying to get an actual live person from there to join us because, again, it's one of those cemeteries that I think until you visit it, you don't get a true appreciation for what was happening in that part of the country at the time. And you get that. And so the same thing with some of these little cemeteries that you've found, like the Magician Cemetery,
Yeah.
it gives you a different appreciation for how people live
Mm-hmm.
that we don't always think about.
It was in Ohio.
Ohio, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Because you don't think of an island, and I knew it
Yeah.
was in the Midwest. I was like, it's somewhere in the middle of the country where you don't think of an island. But
Well, I went to Forest Hill in Madison, which is just gorgeous, so beautiful. But it's got the northernmost Confederate graveyard in America because there was a prison near there. And
yep.
so the people who died, yes,
different
the Confederates who
appreciation.
died at the prison were buried in this lot. And so it was kind of neglected and all of that till a Southern woman moved north and she cared for it. And, all the graves are marked and all that. And so it was kind of a nice story. But then there were these larger monuments there was one that was talking about I can't remember how I would put it, but it was basically our boys who sacrificed everything. And it was one of those monuments that was placed, much later after the Civil War and was controversial up there. And so after the I need to get my facts straight, but after the march with the tiki torches, and everybody started to reassess the Confederate monuments, the Madison City Council took a look at these monuments and said, the ones that are there that date from the Civil War, that's history. Let's leave it. The ones that were placed in 1980 that were lionizing the Civil War Confederates, those are not historical, and they pulled them out. So, it's the way that history continues to change in a place that you would think of as, set in stone.
Right.
I like that because, with everything that was coming down, and for it to leave the monuments that were there from the Civil War, or the memorials, that whatever, that I think that was a very wise decision by whoever made that decision. I think that was very smart.
Because we don't want to lose the history.
No.
Right. And we can't deny it.
Right. Yeah. It happened. We have to remember it somehow. But yes, to keep the original history, because that's where we learn what really happened, is going all the way back. Unfortunately, and this is worldwide too. It doesn't just pertain to us and our Civil War, but it pertains to events worldwide, where after so many decades or centuries, sometimes things become so romanticized in a way that, the history itself is kind of left out of it. And we look at one thing just in that way. And it becomes, and that's where we forget what led up to certain events, or, wars included, especially wars, because so many of them involved killing off so many of our people, again, worldwide, not just us, but around the world.
At one of the graves I visited was Fred Korematsu, who was he was a civil rights pioneer, but he was American. His parents were Japanese immigrants. He was born in America, in Oakland, California, and he grew up speaking English as American as anybody. And when Roosevelt decided to lock up all the Japanese in World War I, he wouldn't go. He said, I'm American. You can't send me back to Japan. I've never set foot there. And he fought it for decades. The ACLU took his case, and it originally went through all the courts, went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, the Japanese are incarcerated. You have to be incarcerated too. That's not racist. That's just facts. And so he was eventually sent to the concentration camp with his family, but he fought it up until I think finally in the 80s, the Supreme Court reheard the case, and they said, oh, yeah, okay, maybe
you are American.
Yeah, maybe that's not great to just lock people up without trials, or, actually accusing them of crimes or anything like that. So yeah, he was the one that won the restitution for all of the Japanese, all the surviving Japanese who were incarcerated.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah.
But what a long
to see his stone, it's so cool. He's got this beautiful gravesite that the feng shui is really great. He's up on the top of the hill and he looks out over San Francisco Bay, and I mean, it's just beautiful. Yeah. So,
but yeah, I always love standing at those kinds of grave sites where you see the view from certain grave sites like that, and you're just like, oh, how did they luck out to get this plot? Where they get to see. I mean, some of it we know, if they're really wealthy or whatever, they were able to pay for that plot, but other times, especially in smaller cemeteries, you're like, how did they get this view so perfectly? I love it. Actually, the cemetery I was just at today was kind of like that because it's near Red Rocks Amphitheater. And so the
Oh,
Red Rocks here, in that part of the mountains, really, really pretty. And when you're facing them, there's just some really pretty views. And I was there at the end of the day, so the sun's starting to go down a little bit, and it was
no.
just really pretty.
They just glowed, right? The rocks just
Yes,
glowed.
some of the
Yeah.
pictures I took, I know I can see like some sun rays kind of coming in from the one side of it, and I was like, "Oh, this is actually really pretty to have this as." And I know when you're dead, you don't really see it anymore, but like just to know that that's where your final resting
Yeah.
place is. But then when your visitors come, like you said, he's overlooking the San Francisco Bay, and
Yeah.
I bet that's
Well,
really pretty at certain times of day.
and after what he went through, unjustly
Yeah.
went
Yeah,
through.
he deserves it.
Yeah.
Well, it just the concept. I don't know much about feng shui, but um, as I'm learning about it, to see Colma is set up like that, where there's a mountain on one side
Mm,
and the bay is um, off in the distance. If you stand just right, you can see it, and the ocean's behind you. And so, just to stand there and feel the breezes, and it's cool, even me not knowing anything about it. So I imagine um, if you've studied up on that, it's really
right.
meaningful. So
Oh, it
Well,
sounds
what a peaceful for people who come to visit that
yeah.
grave, then, not only do they get to think about who's there, but like in such a beautiful setting to enjoy
mhm.
that moment and have it just be so wonderful.
Well, and just the ferocity, of
Mhm.
this guy to say, no,
I'm an
sorry, if
American.
the law is wrong. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sad he had to fight it so hard, but I'm glad he did. And I'm glad that not only for himself, but it benefited so many others too. It wasn't
Yeah,
like he was just saying it's just me. He was fighting for all of those
right.
Japanese who were born as Americans.
Yeah.
So many of them came here just like so many other nationalities trying to work hard and make their livings and yeah. And then we looked at him and said, "Oh, well, because we don't like Japan right now, we don't want any of you here," even
Right.
though they had nothing to do with what the Japanese were
Oh,
deciding at that time.
Yeah.
The Japanese in Japan, not the Japanese in America. Yes. Uh, so so you were going to do a Kickstarter for this
Mhm.
particular book. So what is sort of the plan? I know you don't have the exact date necessarily, but it's coming soon.
It is coming
Um,
soon.
so what is your plan for the Kickstarter and how people can support that in order to get their copies of the book?
Well, I'm still like trying to figure out all the different levels. What I did with the Death's Garden book is
Mm-hmm.
for the first day of the Kickstarter, there was a special price.
Right.
So if you bought the book that day, you got a discount. And I think I'm going to do the same thing again because that was
Wonderful.
really helpful. Um, I did a couple of tiers where you could get the first and second book in the series, or you could get all of my cemetery books. Um, and I sign them and
Which is not a
personalize
bad
them and
deal,
all of that.
guys.
Yeah.
If you haven't gotten, now I've forgotten several of your books already, but
no, I like the
anyway.
idea. It's like you have the stories, but I want to read your essays. I want
Mm-hmm.
to read what your thoughts and that because a lot of people don't voice that. So
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of surprised there aren't more cemetery essays.
yeah,
Most of the research or most of the stuff that's published it's very historically centered and based, and yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not a
Um,
story.
or there are books by people who worked in cemeteries or you know cut headstones or uh, more of a here's their life story kind of thing.
Right.
Um, but for me, it's been just this adventure as I learn stuff and go places, and every time, how it is, every time you're in a new cemetery something strikes you and you're like, wow, I never thought of that before, and so have to research and find out more about that information. So yeah, I'm gonna try and do some fun things too. One of the things I did for the first Kickstarter is for what I thought was an outrageous sum of money, somebody could come to Colma and hang out with me, and we'll go poke around cemeteries together. And somebody took me up on it.
I love that.
Yeah. And so I think I'm going to do the same kind of thing, that, come, we'll just go, we'll poke around. I'll show you all my favorite places. There's a pub down there where they do the funeral luncheons and stuff. We'll go have lunch and, you know, talk about cemeteries all day. And I may do some more like some online things too. I was thinking maybe office hours where, just as part of the Kickstarter, I'll be available online. Do you want to come and talk to me about cemeteries, or show me your favorite cemetery books, or,
that'd be fun.
Yeah. I want to know more about people who are interested in this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of
what we do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the joy of the AGS, right? Of the Gravestone Studies group,
Yes.
is that you get to meet people who are just as kooky about this stuff as you are, and then you get to hear about their pet projects, and everybody is just this enormous wealth of knowledge, and so I feel like we ought to get up. It's nice that once a year the AGS does a conference so you can meet people, but I wish there was more community. And their the book club does that some, but yeah. I originally was thinking like a book club, but I read kind of slowly, so I don't know if I want to be in charge of that. But yeah, kind of a meetup thing for.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah.
Well, in AGS, they do their book. I think it's a monthly book.
It is monthly, yeah.
Thing that they're doing. I always look at it, I get my newsletter every month and I read it and I'm like, what are the books they're reading? And I always think I should do it. It's just the time wise that I'm like, I don't know if I can devote any more time to something else. So that's the only reason I haven't, although I have read some of the books, and I do like to follow along with what they're reading just so that I can pick up, because, that's some of the newer books. That's how I found out about them, is through the AGS book club.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I don't know if you follow Chantal La Rochelle.
Mm-hmm.
Hope I'm pronouncing that right, but she always reviews the books that they've talked about, and so I like to go and read her reviews and see what she has to say.
Yes, I always love that. But yeah, and I'm looking, well, I wish I could be at the conference this year, and again, timing wise, it's not working out. I'm hoping next summer I can actually make it to another conference, but this year is in York, Pennsylvania, which is going to be a really cool conference, I think, because there's some really cool cemeteries in that area. But and I would love to be there in person. It's just not going to happen again this year. But
yeah, but 2026 is going to be the bicentennial, or not quasi-centennial, the 250th anniversary. So who knows where it might be.
It could be happening that summer, the summer of 2026, depending on where that one's held. But I would love to go. I'm sorry, AGS friends, I just can't make it again this year because theater camp is going to get in the way. But I think this might be maybe my last summer doing the theater camp stuff. So I love the students. I love helping to coordinate stuff, but it really cuts into my cemetery time in the summer. And I think I'm at a place in my life where I'd rather be in the cemetery. So, and studying the cemetery and talking with people about cemeteries. And like you said, the community is great, because when you meet up with other people who do the cemetery stuff, that you don't get the weird looks and the all of that. People just get excited and they start telling you.
It's so great to be able to just talk about this stuff and not have somebody side eye you about
right.
Yeah, that's what I noticed that when we hosted the AGS conference. Was it a couple years now in Colorado?
Yeah, it's been a couple of years since we did it here.
Lunch. It was like, when you meet your cousins for the first time, and even though you may never have met your cousins, like each other forever, and that's exactly how it felt. It was like you didn't feel like the odd man out anymore, and it was really, really cool. It was really cool. So, and Jenny, we need to.
Yep. Well, and that's why I love our podcast, because we get to talk to all our guests like Loren here, who spend time in the cemeteries and researched them. And I love the essays that you put out about your experiences in the cemetery. Because like you said, it's not they're educational, but they're not the educational in the way that the other books are written. kind of is a great way to, for those of us who like to just wander the cemeteries sometimes and stuff, to know that other people experience those same moments of joy and ecstatic moments when you're walking through a cemetery you've never been to before, or maybe one that you've been to a million times and then you have that new discovery. But reading it the way you write your essays means we're not the only ones that sit there and do that. It's
Well,
the
it's like
camaraderie.
when you have the history fact, you have the facts. And so
Mhm.
you may have feelings, you may have thoughts, but it's an essay, it's your personal feelings and experiences and your heart that you're sharing with your readers that you wouldn't necessarily get from the facts of a story of someone's life. So I really like that. I'm going to have to.
Well, we're getting the facts of Loren's life in this.
Exactly. No, I like
Well,
that very much. So,
one of the cemeteries we went to was the old Christian cemetery in Singapore, because we had
Oh,
some friends who were staying in Singapore and they said, come and visit. Can't turn that down. So we did. But, standing there in the cemetery and seeing all these headstones where they're Dutch and they're German and they're English and Thai
I
and,
love that.
Chinese, all these different languages, all these people who came to this place, you know, and stayed, without choice necessarily. But,
Right.
it was just fascinating to me because, getting there on a plane was a long day's trip. Getting there
I,
on a boat,
oh
wow.
yeah.
And just to, you know, think about people in the past were brave, in a way that I'm not,
and you think
people,
about the fact that they didn't have so many modern conveniences to make
yeah,
that journey and then the life there.
yeah,
I mean, that's a whole new climate and everything from where a lot of those people came from. And to
mhm,
learn how to live in that when you didn't.
yeah. And then my kid sat down next to a scorpion, so it's her favorite cemetery ever because she almost died, but she didn't.
You almost die in the cemetery. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah.
Yeah, scorpions are a little not my favorite critters.
Now they're just
I don't know
crazy.
how big they get in Singapore, but they're pretty big. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen them in New Mexico when we've been in New Mexico, but and yeah, they're maybe not as big as the Singapore ones,
Yeah,
but
you could
I've
have.
seen one, and that was enough. Thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah. I don't care for them.
No, they're just
Yeah.
I can remember a few times when we lived in New Mexico, they get into the house like a spider or anything else, and you're just like, oh, let's take you outside. We don't need you in here. Just don't sting me. Yeah. No, I'm not big on those kinds of critters, but it
No.
is something you have to think about though when you're spending time in a cemetery, what
yeah.
kind of wildlife you might run across
Do
depending on
you
where you're at.
do you have snakes in Colorado?
Yep.
Yes.
We have rattlesnakes are the ones we really have to watch out for. Um, because and it's going to ramp up here soon. It'll be as it warms up, they'll start coming out a little bit more. I mean, they could be out year round technically. They don't People think they hibernate. They don't really hibernate, but they are slower in the winter.
Mhm.
It slows them down, but they'll be out soon. So that's one of the things that I think about because I will go to cemeteries by myself so often. And I never worry about live people in the cemeteries, but I
Right.
do worry about things like the snakes or some of the other wildlife. Some of the cemeteries I like to wander up in near the mountains, you have to watch for bears. That's another one we have to think about are
We
bears.
have to worry about mountain lions here. I
Oh
Wow.
was at
yeah.
a cemetery one day and, all the birds got quiet. I was like, okay, how far away is my car? Because, it was grassland on two sides and then trees on the other two. And I was, something well could have been in those trees. It was going to run faster than I was.
But the thing is, you were aware of it, and
Mhm.
that's really smart because so many people are not aware of their environment anymore. They're always plugged in, or yeah, I'm surprised more people don't get eaten by mountain lions because they're so disconnected from everything around them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, and the mountain lions are much quieter than the bears. Like they will, and because they're usually in the trees, they'll
Yeah.
creep up on you quite quickly. Yeah, we do have them here too, but I think the
yeah.
bears are more of a problem than the mountain lions. And then snakes would be the other ones that
Yeah.
you would
I
want to
was
stay
in
away.
cemetery, like way in the middle of nowhere. I could see town, I guess. So it wasn't that far in the middle of nowhere, but it was a little
Far
town.
enough.
And I found this enormous snake skin in the grass, and it was as long as my leg is. And I'm, out there in my jeans and tennis shoes. And I don't wear boots. I don't have a stick. I don't know. And I was like, well, they probably don't have a doctor, but they might have a vet, and he might have some antivenom. And I could, as long as I can crawl to the car and roll down the hill,
That's always
I'm
my
not
thought.
going to die.
Well, chances are
to
he
get it
probably
off
wasn't
fast enough to get down the hill to help.
Yeah.
chances are something that big probably was a bull snake, and bull snakes are harmless, but
Yeah.
Well, it was one of those things where, I was walking around and I could see all the holes where the gophers lived. I'm like, well, and I thought, if somebody's living here, somebody's eating them. But I didn't follow that out until I found the snake skin. And I was like,
oh.
And it hits. Yeah, those gopher holes are sometimes almost more dangerous than anything else because
undermine and go.
Yeah. And they just, you're like, whoop, you step in one of those the wrong way. And I've done that and you'll twist an ankle pretty good. So yeah, watch those gophers. They like it. And like you said, if the gophers are there and the other small critters, that means there's predators there too, because they're going to eat them.
Yeah.
So you just be aware. Just, keep your eyes. And like you said, when the birds stop, that's where you kind of go, wow, it got really quiet really quick. What's here? Yeah. That's always a good sign. It's either something there that you probably don't want to be too close to, or the weather's about to change real fast. So
this was a hawk.
So they got quiet really quick.
Yeah. They didn't want the hawks.
He flew overhead, and he went, and they all started up again. I'm like, you guys, get me out.
You're like, thanks for the heart attack.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, I'm so looking forward to this book. So as soon as the Kickstarter, we're going to keep an eye on this. So when Loren releases everything, we'll make sure it goes up on our website and our social media, so you guys can follow along and get her new book, or her latest book, and cemetery book, because you publish other things too. So Loren also writes science fiction and lots of other things. So if you check out her website, which I will link in the show notes, here you can find all of the things that you write. So, you've done so much writing, and you write essays for things, and you've written for a lot of other publications, and you've been featured on other podcasts and other shows. You were on NPR not too long ago.
Yeah, in the fall.
That's exciting.
It was really cool. Yeah, because he was a cemetery nerd too. Like, you do my heart. Well, he was talking about the cemeteries in LA that are the best place to take a date. It's like, oh, honey.
Ooh, the romantic cemetery. I'm all for that. Grab a picnic, grab your date. Let's go. Yes, I think that's awesome. So I'll link your website in our show notes so folks can check that out if they haven't yet. And of course, all of your books are available for purchase through the website. So definitely check out all of Loren's writings and stuff if you've never done it. And of course, I know a lot of people are familiar with this book, 199 Cemeteries to See Before You Die. This has been all over, I think, every cemetery Facebook group, everywhere. People point this one out. But so if you read this one, definitely check out this one then, 222 Cemeteries to See Before You Die. Because some of the cemeteries here are also in this one again with updates, because you had learned new information when you published this. But there's a lot of other ones in here that you didn't feature in this one. So both books are well worth reading, and the pictures are glorious.
Not sure the 199 Cemeteries it's not in print anymore. It may still be available, but
you can get used copies of it usually if you look at some of the used book sites that are available online and stuff. But this one, like I said, there's several of the cemeteries in this one are actually in the first one and with updates. So that's great, because then you learn a little bit more anyway, because you learn, like you said, you're always learning something. So,
well, and I was surprised how much things changed. One of the cemeteries that I went to 20 years now, but the African burial ground in Manhattan. The stuff I saw is now closed off because there's a subway line that goes underneath it and it's settled, and so it's not safe anymore.
Oh,
So, it was one of those things I had to update in the new book because you can't see what I saw, which is a shame. It's a beautiful place.
It really is a shame.
Yeah.
You would think they could come up with a way to make it safe again.
Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully, there's some engineers out there that know how to do that. They'll figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And those are important burial grounds. We've already lost enough of our African burial grounds in other parts of the country that sometimes get discovered accidentally again, with some that are just gone from,
Right.
There's a lot of cemeteries actually that have disappeared because of people building on top of them and moving things around. And it's never a surprise when cemeteries get moved and stuff. That happens all the time. But there's been plenty of stories where you come across somebody where they are like, oh, there was a cemetery here once upon a time. We had no idea because the stories got lost in history. So definitely check out Loren's website. And again, we'll keep you posted for when the sales go live for the new book. And tell everybody again the title of the new one.
It's called Still Wish You Were Here.
And I'm so excited for it. And again, the personal views of Loren and her adventures in the cemeteries. And I'm looking forward to learning about these
definitely
cemeteries that really mean something to you. Like you said, your first one was more about the ones that people know around the world and visiting, which still fascinating, but to have those personal ones that are related to your family or your kids, or like you said, the one in Singapore, which would be so fascinating.
Yeah, that was cool.
Thank you again, Loren, for taking time out to join us. And we'll have you back again when you're ready.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's always so much fun.
Oh, yes.
Enjoy it tremendously.
Thank you for joining us today. To learn more about today's episode, visit our website, theordinaryextraordinarycemetery.com, where you'll find additional links in our show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel. And if you enjoyed this or any of our episodes, consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Your support helps others find our show and discover all of our ordinary, extraordinary stories.
You can also follow us on social media for cemetery facts, photos, quotes, and more. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery and on X at OrdExtraCem. If you'd like to help support us financially, you can donate a cup of coffee by clicking on the coffee cup icon on our website or YouTube, or purchase some of our fabulous Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery merchandise through our store link.
Until we meet again.